Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Prince Podcast here on Podcast Juice. My name is Michael Dean, and joining me today is Mr. Big Sexy and Saxer. How are you?
I'm doing great. Had a busy week, had a lot of litigation, had to straighten somebody out in the courtroom, but that's all right. I'm ready to roll now, ready to roll.
All right, and we have a very special guest today. He is coming to us live from Hawaii. He's still living that high fashion life, I suppose, doing his thing, jet setting. None other than Mr. Paul Peterson. Sir, how are you?
So good. I'm honored to be on. Thanks a lot for having me.
Man, this has been a long time coming. It's our pleasure.
Right?
I want to say, Paul, Paul, you take the low, I'll take the high. Now let's ride. Okay, so.
Yeah. That's a little
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, man.
I'll never forget the day I got that. Michael, I'll never forget the day I got that exact version delivered to me at my mom's house. That was exactly how I learned the inflections and all that stuff that Prince wanted me to do, was by receiving guide vocals just like that one. And
wow.
It's so cool that everybody else gets to hear all of that because it's history now.
Yeah, man. It's like, let's jump right into that real quick because this is very interesting.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've got so many accomplishments. We're going to get into those, but we're starting at the family right now. So how old were you when you got that tape, for instance?
Oh, boy. Well, let's see. I was 17 or 18 when I was in the time, and I think that lasted about a year. So either 19 or 20, but, of course, I'm a bass player, so my math is probably not correct. But I'd say 19 or 20, and it's so funny as I look at my children when they were 20. Now, of course, they're 25 and 22. I was given that responsibility, and I think it was a blessing being as green as I was because I wasn't scared. I was like, cool, this is just another gig, and this is what I'm going to do. And I didn't realize the not the repercussions, I guess, but the gravity of what I was doing and how that I was chosen to be the singer or the co-lead singer in this band.
Right.
I didn't really fathom how important that role would become, and of course, I didn't think that we'd be talking about it 35 years after the fact, which is so cool.
You remember what songs were on that tape that you got initially?
They didn't come in bunches, if I recall. I think they came one at a time, two at a time. I can't remember exactly what was on each individual tape, but I remember receiving many of them, and I was living at home, and I'd get them, and I'd, have to go to school on them, but I didn't know what level of school I should have gone to school on them. But because once I got to the studio, I was with David Rifkin and Jellybean, and they would, I thought I just had to learn the melody, and I'd put my own thing on it, because, I was cocky, and I thought I had it going on. No. That wasn't the case. I'd have to listen to the first line and do my best to get every inflection, very close to how Prince had it. And that's how the rest of those sessions went. So it was like, oh, now I get it. Now I understand what the role is here. And it became very apparent what I had to do to get that done. And, it became a technique that I just put in my toolbox at that point. And it was a great learning experience. And, of course, a great record to be a part of.
Was there any sort of intimidation, to like essentially you had to, I don't know if mimic is the word, but I mean, literally sing it the way Prince sang it, Is there intimidation involved in that?
No intimidation at all. Not at all. No, I mean, what it was, I probably didn't realize why I had to do that at the time, but of course I do now, many, many years later, is he had a style and an approach that worked. It was funky, and I know I didn't have that approach when I was that age. And he had first of all, a great intuition in the studio, a great way he would interpret the lyrics that he wrote, it was cool. And for me to be able to cop that really kind of helped with the whole package of the band and the way he visualized not only the music, but the whole imaging and branding of that band. And it led all the way back to how I sang those tracks. And he had that vision from the beginning and the way he sang the guide vocals. So for me to be able to cop that, I think was essential to the whole image and branding of the band.
And how long did it take, the recording process in terms of doing the vocals? How long you think it took you to do the whole album?
Oh God, I'm not even gonna fathom to guess that, but I can tell you this: when I came into the studio for the first time, I remember distinctly David Z saying to me, he said, I said, well, how long is this going to take this? I've got something to do in a couple hours, I said to him. And he's like, nope, you better cancel your dinner plans, cancel everything, because it's going to take a while. Wow. In those days, I thought a lead vocal would take, a half an hour or something like that. But we really studied what was going on. He was meticulous in his approach, and he was given a job to produce this record, and he knew what that meant because he'd worked with Prince for so long. So we worked those vocals. I mean, it wasn't that I was not necessarily a bad singer by any means, but to capture the essence and the vibe of what Prince was doing on that was very important to that project. And David was a stickler, man. So we worked it.
Was there ever a chance did you ever walk out of there crying some days? Can't do this.
Every day, man. I hate you guys. I quit, man.
I mean, had you had recorded
work, man.
Have you had recorded any vocal work before this?
Oh, sure. Well,
Okay.
You got to understand something. This wasn't my first barbecue as far as recording or being in a band or anything like that. For those of you who don't know, I'm the youngest of 5 musicians in my family, and my mom and dad are musicians or were musicians. So being the youngest, I didn't know any better, and I thought everybody played an instrument and sang and went in the recording studio. So to answer your question, I had previously done sessions, but you got to understand, I come from a bebop family where most things are improvisational, and this was not that. So that was a learning curve for me. So a lot of what I had to do, starting with the time, was a learning curve for me. It was very exact in approach, and what I had to do was make sure that I learned that work ethic, because it was a different story than what I was used to. So that was a fun thing to learn, and I look back on that and go, geez, those however many years I was in the Prince camp was like college for me.
All right, you got that win. We on that win machine on that world tour.
How bad is it?
No, you're good.
You want me to? Are you sure? Because I know it can be bad. That's what happens up here in the North Shore. They got the trade winds coming in there.
That was probably the worst of it right there, but so we're fine. Okay. So the family, nothing compares to you. Obviously, you probably had many questions on this song, but I'm just curious, when you were recording this song, though, any inkling that, this song is special, or it was just like, this is another dope Prince song? Or, okay, let me jump into this. Or again, was it one of those songs you're like, I got to sing this?
Well, I love the ballad to begin with, but little did we know how much I, first of all, fall in love with that song. The poetry, the musicality, not only that he had, but when I went into the studio, there was drums on it. It was a rock ballad. It was a pop rock ballad, and so when I sang it, and what I sang to and what ended up on the record were two completely different things. So I got through the recording of the vocal, and I think I did a okay job on that. But when they hired Claire Fisher to come in and put those heart-wrenching strings on, really took it to a whole different musical level. For not only for me, but for, I mean, there's so many fans out there that think that is the only version,
Right.
but not as many people know about that version, you know. But if you go back and listen to that, and you listen to the musicality of the strings and the emotion that he added to the production of that via Claire Fisher, and the approach of the vocal and the hold on, there we go, and the incredible tenor playing by Eric Leeds and co-lead vocals by Susanna. The fact that he would take all other instrumentation out of that for the most part was brilliant. So Prince and David Z, you know, my hat's off to you, and the way and the bravery for taking out all the other instrumentation.
Yeah, I always wondered about that too. Like songs like you know, High Fashion, Mutiny. You know, my understanding, right? They pulled the bass off of those tracks on the release version. Is that right? Bass guitar.
Yeah, they did. I mean, I'll tell you. I got to tell you something in relation to that. Is that Prince is probably one of the most underrated bass players there is, or he is so greasy. I picked up so much in my short amount of time when I was there, because he'd play bass with a pick.
Wow.
That's where I picked that up, and that's what I've been known for years, is that kind of rhythmic, sloppy, funky, not necessarily playing notes, but kind of ghost notes and that kind of thing. He was the instigator of all that, and he had that on High Fashion and Mutiny, and some parts are left on there, but I think at High Fashion he took a lot of that out. But and you know, it served its purpose. In those days, that calliope sounds and all those sounds you're hearing was from new tech that he loved. It would be inspired from, and that was in those days that was a DX7 made by Yamaha, and he would just explore this stuff and get inspired and write, and he dug the way that sounded, and I think it was not normal to just have that there. And of course, he's known for doing things that are not necessarily the status quo, right?
Right. Man, so I want to go back just a little bit. We're going to come back to the family, but going back to the time, Purple Rain, you know, you coming into the band at this point, and this is, of course, you know, after Monty, Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis. So I'm going to ask you this. What was the audition thing like? And then, you know, talk to us a little bit in terms of how were you accepted into the band? What was your relationship with Morris and that sort of thing?
Well, that's about an hour answering that. Well, sit back, grab a cup of coffee. Here we go. So I just graduated from high school. I was up partying with a buddy of mine playing golf in northern Minnesota. I get a phone call from my brother-in-law, Stuart Pastor, who was the first cousin of Bobby Z. I'll write this down because it gets complicated. So Bobby Z's first cousin is my brother-in-law, Stuart Pastor. He calls me on the phone and says, "You have an audition with The Time." I'm like, "What?" He said, "You have an audition with The Time." And I'm up hanging out with my bud, just celebrating the fact that I graduated from high school. He said, "Get your butt down here. You got to learn these songs, the auditions in three days or something like that." So we cut my trip short, and I went back to the house, living with my mom, of course, and I got the same thing happens. I get a cassette tape delivered to the house, except it didn't get delivered until the night before the audition. So I had to learn, God, I don't know, I'm thinking about a half a dozen Time songs to be able to play them, sing, memorize them, and try to look cool and, you know, be able to move my long, lanky body, you know, so I could, you know, be able to do some steps. So I go in the next day to this warehouse on Highway 7, Minneapolis, kind of like, you know, very nondescript building. Walk in, there's Jesse. There's Jelly Bean. There's another guy, keyboards, and another bass player. So I suppose I was nervous. I really don't remember that feeling strongly. But again, being 17, you really don't understand the gravity of what you're walking into. So I go in and I start playing the songs. I, get familiar with the instruments. We roll through some of these songs, and was pretty much it. Jesse was running the show back in those days. Morris was nowhere to be found. And I think it went well. Then I left the rehearsal hall, got back home, got a call back. They'd come back the next day. I go back the next day, and Prince is sitting there this time. I'm like, oh, okay, what's going on here? I think we played a little bit more, and I think he wanted to check it out. And this is where Prince came up to me, and he did the whole Reconnecting thing. I don't know whether I was the first person or if he had been doing this forever, but he literally came up and did the Reconnecting thing to me because I was nervous meeting this guy. That I do remember.
And you mean record store, like straight from the movie, like he did in Under Cherry Moon, like writing it down and stuff?
Exactly right. He wrote down the words Stowe, right? And then he said, "What is it?" I'm like, "I don't know." Scared little kid. He said, "Say it fast." Stowe. What is it? I don't know. Say it again. Stowe. Just scared. He said, "Where do you buy your records?" Stowe. And he laughed, and I laughed, and so that was his icebreaker with me, which was really cool. As I look back on that now, that was, it was his way of welcoming into the band. And after that, he said, "We're gonna pick out some clothes for you." So he said, "What?" He showed me a bunch of swatches from, of material for a normal time pimp suit, right? And I picked up this beautiful pinstripe black suit, and he said, "No one's going to notice you in that." And then he picked out the orange one that I wore in Purple Rain. And I was like, no, I don't want to wear that. He's like, "You're wearing that." And that's how I got to be the orange guy with the pompadour hairdo in the time. And that's how that all started.
Wow. You got your pimp suit. You got a band.
Yeah. Pimp suit, living in Richfield, suburbia, Minnesota, in one of the hippest R&B funk bands of all time. I mean, incredible. Lucky guy.
And rocking that pompadour.
Man, you saw that hairdo. That took me longer to get ready than it took my girlfriend to get ready. An hour on that hairdo.
Welcome to the Prince world.
You dig? Yeah.
So, like, what was so obviously you guys getting prepared. I would imagine there's a lot of rehearsal, getting the new band members and everybody, gelling together. What was that like?
Well, you had asked before what my relationship was with Morris, and there really was none, unfortunately. Simply because he was, his best friends were just fired.
Right.
And as I look back at it now, I'm like, I don't blame him. He's pissed off. He didn't want to deal with these people who were taking the place of his brothers. So he really wasn't around. He wasn't present. Jesse ran the show. Jesse was, I think he took a page out of the book of Prince and James Brown and the way he handled the band by intimidation. And, it was just his method. He was very super, super, super demanding. Not necessarily great bedside manner. I tell him this to his face. I don't mind it. He knows it. Yeah, he was, it was a lot to handle, especially trying to come into that thing. It was like such culture shock for me, number one. Number two, I'm come from a bebop family where, things are art if you let them slide, right? There's no art involved here. was, you need to learn your part. You need to be able to play and sing, execute, be funky, be cool. And again, his brothers just got fired, so he's probably not really happy with the fact that he's been tasked with directing this thing and trying to pull it together for this movie. So the rehearsals were long. The rehearsals were intense. And I think I'm going to get to how many months I was in the band before we did our first gig, but we played at First Avenue once when I was in the band, and that was recorded in the truck in the back of First Avenue for Purple Rain. That was the end of that. So we filmed the movie, and the Morris was gone.
So going back to that performance you just mentioned, that performance is out there, and rumored to be like that was like. I remember during the performance, you guys do this whole sort of church. I forget what they want to call it, but Morris does like a long sort of monologue type of thing, and he kind of like goes in on Prince a little bit, right? Like, do you remember?
I recall something like that too.
Okay.
It's hard to. I haven't heard that show in 30 years, so
I got you.
He's jogging my memory banks here.
Well, he says
send me that stuff because I got to hear it.
Yeah, he says something on there that's very interesting, and it ties back to you, and well, to the record you're on. He says in that, Prince, you took, did you give? Now, at the end, of, was it Mutiny?
Yes.
You can hear Prince saying that, right? So here's a question I have for you. And then, on Prince's version of Mutiny, he says Jesse, he says Morris. Did you know that song had, was, I'm going to call it a diss record because that's what I do. But did you know that song was sort of pointed at them when you were recording that or when you heard it or anything? Were you picking up on any of that?
You mean Mutiny?
Yes.
Absolutely. But it was more from the tail end like you're talking about. I'm bold chicken cockies and said, Jesse, you took, did you give all that? Yeah, I remember him leaving that on. I didn't think it was going to live on the record. I thought it was just on there because he was, talking stuff at the end of that thing, and it would be broomed once the real record came out. The fact that they kept that on there, I think he kind of liked that rivalry aspect of it. I mean, God, they had it for forever growing up. Why wouldn't they keep that going? I think it was I think those guys had a special brotherly relationship that was built on competition. And that's what I read into that. And I knew that, they were making digs at each other, but, that wasn't my dig to make, even though people probably thought it was me saying that at a certain point in time, but obviously everyone figured it out. That was Prince taking a dig at those guys.
Man, that's
so, I mean, I knew it was on there, and I knew it was a dig towards them. I got my own digs on different records aimed at me later.
Right.
I'm sure we'll talk about that.
We'll get into that. That's just wild to me because, nowadays, obviously we have these records and people battle and sometimes it can go a whole different thing. But I was always curious, like, when the time sort of comes to an end and then, how was the conversation sort of come to you where it's like, hey, St. Paul, man, wants you to head this thing, and we grab some of the other members. I don't know how to ask it. And one day I want to be able to ask Jelly Bean this and Jerome as well. But I mean, like, how did you guys feel in terms of, okay, let's create a new group, and we're bringing some of the Time members into this, and it's a new thing. I mean, how did you feel? Here's the question: how did you feel when you were approached to be the lead singer of this new thing, sort of from the ashes of the Time?
Well, we all knew Morris had left. That was the big news. Prince called us in for a meeting that was people who were remaining who did not leave the fold. Jesse had left. Morris had left. There were people, I think Mark Cardenas was still around at that time, and Jerry Hubbard was around at that time, but I think they ended up, I can't remember if they were in this particular meeting or not, but Prince basically sat us in a circle at the rehearsal hall. He said, these guys are gone. we're going to do a new group. You're going to be the new lead singer. And he pointed right at me. I had no idea that he had heard me sing other than the time gigs, but he must have. The only thing that I can think of is that Morris and I would do a little lick battles in the dressing room at First Avenue, and our dressing room was separated from Prince's by a sheet. So I'm sure Prince probably heard some of that. Only thing that I can think of that he would have heard me sing. But so he points at me and says, "You're going to be the new lead singer of this band." Of course, my mouth drops, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool, let's go." So he basically said, "Who's in and who's out?" I believe if I'm remembering this correctly, that over the course of the next week or weeks, that's when Mark and Jerry Hubbard decided to go with Jesse, and then Prince began to fill out the rest of the band. I didn't know Eric Leeds. I didn't know Susanna. So this is one of his visions that he created, and he was brilliant at picking out individuals to support the stories and the mini movies that he would. I call them mini movies because the family definitely is it's a story. It's a whole plot to it, and the record and the look and the sound and that whole bit. But the people that he put together for that, the fact that we're hanging out and playing shows 30 some odd years later, sure, he didn't bank on that, but we still love each other and love the music that we created and continue to create. So, and a hell of a ride, man.
Wow. Now you guys had the family. You guys at the time you had. I'm gonna let that go by.
What, the windstorm?
Yeah. You were either over there in a windstorm or you were in the biggest greenery place smoking trees. But that's neither here nor there.
If you want me to, I can try to move it to the car, man. If it's driving crazy.
Let's try to do that if you don't mind.
You want? Okay, hold on. Yeah, because we don't want to have people listening. Okay, you're gonna have to give me a couple of minutes here.
Not a problem.
So I gotta head out to the vehicle.
Now you doing some shows out there?
1 second. Give me a couple more minutes here, fellas.
That's right. Are you out there playing a gig?
All right. I'm playing 2 gigs out here.
Okay.
I sat in with Mick on Tuesday night, and then I'm playing a gig in a week, actually Thursday night, with a bunch of locals and just doing some rock and roll.
I think now we got a bad reception.
Do you really?
Oh, okay, there you go. You go, Nick. You're good.
Hold on.
You're good now.
All right, so hold on. I'm in my vehicle now.
Okay, sounds great.
Tell me how this is.
No, you sound perfect.
Much better?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Let's start all over again.
No. Man, I forgot what I was going to... Oh, okay, so the family. You guys had one concert or show at that time, back then at the First Avenue. Tell me about that show. I mean, was there I would imagine there was a lot of preparation to go into playing this record live. And here's the thing, I saw the concert on bootleg years later, but some of the other songs that blew my mind on that record were like Susanna's Pajamas and Yes. And to actually see you guys play those, I was blown away. I was like, man, Paul Peter. I was like, St. Paul was funky. Like, he was on the keyboard and stuff. I was like, oh shit, okay. But talk to us about that concert, man.
Well, same sort of thing with that concert. We rehearsed for months and months and months, getting it right, and we'd be videotaping everything and checking it out. And Prince Jerome would be choreographing and
all right, hold on for a second. So now
thing come together.
You're breaking up really bad. All right. So yeah, we were talking about the First Avenue concert,
Yep.
and you guys.
So the First Avenue concert, it took, once again, we rehearsed for months and months and months and months. You know who's great with these dates is Eric Leeds. He knows all these dates up, they were yesterday. Of course, I've killed enough brain cells between 1985 and 2018, so I don't remember any of the specific dates, but it was many months of rehearsals, getting ready, making sure that the choreography was right. Prince was really involved with that, with the show, and Jerome would help with the steps, and just trying to get the whole branding of that band happening. And then we finally, Prince would call these shows at First Avenue, and people would just show up, and the place was packed. And I remember doing that show, and once I got done with it, Prince hugged me on the side of the stage, like he was so proud of the work that we did and we pulled off. So that was a really cool moment in my life.
Was there any talk of going on the road, the family?
I don't recall that. I'm sure that he wanted to take us on the road at some point, but, he had other stuff going on. He shipped me out to acting, singing, and dancing lessons in L.A. While he was making a Cherry Moon.
So this period, and this is the album had already been out at this point, is that right? Or it had,
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And we were all, still in the contract negotiations, and the record's out, video's out. He's out making a movie, and we're all disappointed with the lack of attention that the record is getting. So we were, but half of the band was in France. I was in L.A., and then we can get into the rest of it later. But it was kind of topsy-turvy at that point.
Now, you said something, you was in the middle of contract negotiations. What do you mean by that?
Well, we were, as a band, when you signed the label, we were the first ones on Paisley Park, the Paisley Park brand, I believe. He had his attorneys negotiate a contract with our then manager. We had a separate manager by the name of Dan Brennan. He was trying to negotiate this record contract, and basically the contract wasn't a great contract, right? I was making the same money I was making as a sideman at the time, and I was like, this doesn't seem right. So we were trying to negotiate it, and the management wasn't budging at all, and I went to Prince once upon a time, and I said, man, this contract isn't great. He said, don't talk to me about it, talk to my managers. Mm. So I went and talked to his managers, and they said, sign it or else. And that's kind of was the beginning of the end for me. Okay,
this is interesting. Now, so the family is a group started by Prince. He does the music, wrote the songs, he gave you the guy vocals, you guys came in, did your thing, but it's essentially his group. And now you're talking about you had to have a contract to sign to his company?
That's right. Park? The individuals, as a band, the entity, were going to sign to Paisley Park Records. That's correct.
How does that work if it's his band? Like, does he sign that contract too, or
No, he at that point in time he was seen as the record company.
Okay.
Not as a band member.
Interesting.
Although 30 years later he'd say, when I was negotiating, trying to use the family name again instead of F Deluxe, he said, you can't be the family. You're missing your most important member, me. I said, well, Prince, what would that look like? He said, we'll talk about that another time.
Man, Prince.
Yeah.
Wow.
Pretty funny, man. I mean, oh, sure. And this is when he and I were getting along great. I mean, obviously, when I split the family, there was discord, man. And, I totally get it. But years later, just for the fans' knowledge, we ended up hanging, talking. I'd call him. We'd meet at a Victor Wooten concert once and hung out and chatted for an hour.
Wow. Yeah. We'll get into. I want to go back to this real quick. So, because I always wondered, like, why did St. Paul leave? It seemed like there was this opportunity. Of course, this is Prince. He's at the height of Princetivity and got all this activity going on. But are you kind of basically saying, the paperwork wasn't proper, and if somebody tells you, well, hey, you either do this or step. So there's no like negotiation type of thing going back and forth, or did you have? I imagine like sort of what. Go ahead.
There was no negotiation. There was no negotiation going on, and coincidentally, what was happening is I got a phone call from a guy from A&M Records that said, "Come in, I want you to produce Janet Jackson's record. Come in and have a meeting with me." I'm like, "All right."
Whoa.
Oh. So I went down to Charlie Chaplin Studios, A&M, and this gentleman's name was John McClain, or is John McClain.
Yeah.
He said, "I'm not here to talk to you about Janet Jackson. That's the only, I just want to get you in the door. I want to steal you away from Prince." I'm like, "What? Nah, that ain't happening, bro." But then he started, pointing things out. My head started turning, and I started thinking about these things. And of course, he's flashing dollars in front of me, and I'm going, all the while these contract negotiations are going south, Prince. You got to remember, I'm a 20-year-old kid, and all this stuff is going on with me, and this is possibly the greatest opportunity I'd ever have to do my own music, which I was raised to do in a musical family. So I started entertaining that. And that's really when, the Prince found out. People were going crazy. The band was going to break up. I ended up leaving the band, and I ended up not even signing with A&M. I signed with MCA.
Right.
And that's when the fight broke out.
The fight. You tell
that's
me.
When the fight broke out.
Well, somebody was swinging, or are you talking about legal fight?
No, it was legal. There was no.
He didn't send Wally in them after you did.
That'd be a better story, wouldn't it?
Yeah, Wally ran me down.
Yeah, I had him in the second round. I had him down. He kept getting back up.
So let me ask you about the other band members, though. How did they, once they heard that you had other offers or things on the table? I mean, did you talk to them about this, or?
I recall talking with Eric and Jellybean and Susanna. They were like you. They were in the same boat with the contract negotiations. They weren't happy that I was leaving by any means. I remember saying, "Baby bro, you got to do what you want to do. We'll be all right." And they were. I mean, Susanna ended up hanging out with the Revolution. Eric joined the Revolution.
Right.
Jerome was in the Revolution. So then I was off making my own solo record. But, I felt badly at that time about, that decision. Everybody questioned me. I was questioning myself.
Mm.
It's a what if scenario. What if I would have stayed with the family? What if I would have done this? What if I would have done that? And fellas, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be today.
Mm.
I don't question that decision at all. I'm ending up exactly where I need to be, and what's cool about it is that we did get back together through, Sheila inviting us to go play her foundation's concert or fundraiser. It wasn't really on any of our radar to get back together, but we had remained friends through all of this. They knew exactly what was going on. And we all grew up. We all had families. We all, we all had our separate lives, and it was just perfect timing to come back together and start playing this music again.
Right. What? Just to go back, because there's the infamous Paul Punk of the Month.
Oh, here we go.
No, bring it.
Yeah.
I ain't afraid.
Now listen,
Big Sexy, I ain't afraid.
There you go.
All right.
I just remember, I think I may have read about this in something that back in the days. I remember reading, I'm like, whoa. And then I have since heard, or maybe I've seen the video of this, but I want to know from you two things. One, Were you there at that concert, if you were or not? And then what did you think about that?
We're talking about the First Avenue concert.
Yes.
I was there.
Okay.
I was there. And my question to myself is, what the hell were you doing there anyway? Why were you going back? And I don't remember why I was there, but I was there. He knew I was there. And I remember distinctly him saying, St. Paul, you got that? St. Paul, pocket of month, and the whole chant and that whole thing. I had T-shirts made up, St. Paul, punk.
That's right. Put some respect
funny.
on the name. That's right. Get your money off of it, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I knew he was going to do some sort of public retaliation, so it didn't surprise me at all. So I had fun with it. Had the T-shirts made up, and then I went in California, same time he was, and again I showed up at another concert. Why, I don't know, but he started in with that again.
Wow.
So I don't even know how many concerts he did that with, but I know that the two I was at, he definitely called me out.
Now, let me ask you this about that, because this could have played a whole different. Now, y'all is good. Y'all some good folks from Minnesota. You know, this is not hip hop. This is not a contact sport. But I'm curious in terms of the loyalty, in terms of camaraderie of homies in the band. Did you ever step to Jerome and like, bruh, you're killing me out there. What's going on, man? I thought we was boys.
We never had a conversation about it. They were doing what they had to do. I was doing what I had to do. It was just kind of an undiscussed understanding. And that was all good. It was all in play anyway. Part of the job description.
Oh, okay. Did you ever like sort of push back in on stage at all or in record to Prince?
The only one I ever did was 25 years later when he still was calling us out doing Ice Cream Castles, and this has got to be 7 years ago. He did something with Mutiny and Ice Cream Castles, calling us out again. So what I did is I took a Hot Summer, turned it into a bad commercial. Did you ever hear any of that?
No.
Oh, dude, go ask your friends, ask them to send you the Hot Summer Menards commercial. There's a department store area, like a Home Depot store called Menards.
Oh, yeah.
Hot summer. I was like, hot summer days at Menards. So I totally turned it into a bad commercial and put it out on the net. And he heard it. I never heard him. So we were going back and forth a little bit on that. But we had some fun with that.
Hilarious.
That's 25 years after the fact.
Right. Okay. I didn't know
Isn't that great, man?
Man.
Oh, sure.
Man, they had you up on some disc records. I don't know if there was any other, well, aside from you going at Morris and Oak Tree and all that, but yeah, Prince, he was not afraid to clown people, I guess, on
Not
stage.
at all. And and there's the Dream Factory that evidently was supposed to be written about or for me.
Yeah.
Right. And let me say, shout out to John McClane, because he was about getting some Minneapolis people. I'm not mad.
He ended
at
up with Jesse.
Right. Yeah, I'm not mad at that. The first, so here's the other big thing too. I always remember this. I always remember you on Video Soul, I believe, with Donnie Simpson. When
One appearance on Video Soul when the Vikings were in the playoffs.
Wow, yeah, I had that on videotape. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, come on. I wish I had that, man. I don't have any of that stuff.
Oh,
That's gotta
man.
be classic.
Yeah, with Donnie Simpson, that was the stuff. I mean, that was must watch. That show, obviously, very big.
Sure was, man. That was the show to be on.
Yeah. What was talk to us about that first solo album? I went back and watched the Rich Man video again today. I hadn't seen it in years. I totally forgot you had old girl AJ Johnson was featured in your video.
AJ was in that. AJ was dating Sonny Emery, the drummer in that video. The reason Sonny was in that is I was while I was making that record, I was also on tour with David Sanborn. And he was David Sanborn's trainer. He introduced me to AJ. My brother Ricky, who produced the record, is on keyboards in those fantastic, terrible outfits of the 80s.
Is that him with the shades and a little beret type of hat on?
Oh, yeah, that's him.
Okay.
That's brother Ricky, who ended up later on producing Most Beautiful Girl in the World for Prince in the 90s. So, yeah, man, that was a interesting record to make. I asked my brother Ricky to come on and produce that with me. And one of the things that I didn't get to experience very much when I was in the Prince camp was a lot of interaction in the studio while Prince was making those records, whether it be the Time or the Family. You got to understand that the Time record, I think I played on one track, and it was the live track. Other than that was all Prince and Jesse and Morris and whomever else. The Family, he basically played everything except for the horn, right? And that's where Eric came in. And so I wasn't involved in the basic tracking of that. And that's all to tell you that when I was making my first record, I negotiated my deal where that I could have control over it, like we all tried to negotiate. I had control over production, songs, those sort of things. But I was green in making records, so I had to learn right on the spot. Talk about throwing myself to the wolves. So I employed my brother to come and help me out, he had more experience in the studio than I did, but man, did I learn a lot about making records. And I'm really proud of that record. I love Rich Man. It was a song we brought in at the last moment. I wrote with one of my longtime friends, Oliver Lieber, who still plays with me in F Deluxe to this day.
Okay.
He co-wrote that. I had Paul Abdul doing all the choreography, trying to still make me dance.
Wow.
And yeah, man. So it was a fun, incredible experience. And all at the same time, I was still fighting the whole Prince, legal team at that point. And who knows whether, his power at radio had any effect on the success or failure of that record. But it was definitely it was a factor, I believe. And it doesn't matter because that record did well. For me, it was, like I said, an incredible learning experience and getting myself out as a solo artist, which is something that I wanted to do since the time I was born.
Well, let me ask you this. I think this record is amazing. It's a dope album. I used to play it a lot. And a couple of things I want to ask about this record. First of all, you saying that there may have been some behind-the-scenes stuff going on with the radio play. That's a shame because...
I can't prove it, man.
I understand
prove
that.
it.
I understand.
And I could, and I don't want to sound like I'm. It could be also that nobody wanted to hear the record. I don't know.
Okay.
But at that point, there was so much mojo going on with that record, that it was an interesting thing for it to not necessarily fly up the charts. But then again, that sounds egotistical. So I don't really know what the factors were, but it was moderately successful. Let's put it that way.
Well, I would say this. There are songs in here. I call there's a song that's the jam to me. I said you got burners. You had intimacy. That's the cut.
Yeah, man.
Okay.
Yeah.
That could play today. You had I'll mess around and start singing. I know you too well. Know you too. I'm telling you, Paul, man.
Yeah.
I'm on these records, man. I feel so too well.
That's cool.
You had that one cut which would remind me of like some George Benson was I Can't Believe We're Through. I was getting that George
David Sanborn on that. My mom played the intro on that.
Wow.
On an OV8, yeah. Mom was ridiculous, man. I got the whole family on the record, but if you go back and listen to that haunting, we call it a verse before the start of the song, that's my mom playing the keyboard on it. She was badass.
Yeah, your mom's bad.
Mama was no joke, man. She was mama to everybody back then. She was an incredible jazz musician and, basically adopted everybody. And everybody rehearsed in her basement from George Benson to Steve Miller, David Sanborn, Now, of course, F Deluxe and all my projects, LP Music, Leeds Peterson, they all are signing the wall. I'm back, all to tell you that I'm back in the house that I grew up in. When my mom passed, I bought the house, renovated everything except for the rehearsal room that's been standing, pretty much the same, untouched for the last 50 years. Talk about musical history in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area.
Wow.
Still alive, man.
You're doing it, man. You're doing. Well, yeah, I want to get off this album real quick. I don't want to get off of it just yet, but, I mean, The Rich Man, you had that, and I can see why that would be maybe the first single. So they want to sort of tie it into, the Prince sort of thing and high fashion, Mutiny, and that kind of stuff, that feel. But I always felt like you had these strong songs. I was like, my man could have been like, coming right off of Hall & Oates, and you'd have been that white dude that everyone would have just been rocking. Like it wouldn't even, you know what I mean? Like it was official R&B soul music. You know what I'm saying? I was like, I didn't understand why it didn't blow. Looking at it, and then you have to remember that Prince's shadow was heavy at that time, and even his sort of thing. You sort of have hip hop and different things sort of lingering to sort of jump in the way of that. And what year did this album come out? Do you remember what year the album came out?
Was it 87?
Was it 86 or 87? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, man. Did you ever play this album live? Did you guys on a road or anything with this?
I never really had the opportunity to do that on this record.
Okay.
You got to understand something as well. Whatever you want to call it, R&B soul music by a blue-eyed Norwegian wasn't necessarily the accepted thing back in those days, like Timberlake is now, or anybody else. It's interesting that you would point out the Hall & Oates factor of that, which was still, R&B, but way more pop. But that's not the direction that we chose to go, especially with the first single on that. We wanted to, with our roots, which were, deep in the Minneapolis sound, and that's the route that the A&R people decided to go with this.
Yeah, I can see why they did that.
A good single to go with, Yeah, that was the way to go as far as marketing was concerned and all that. And it did separate me from people like Hall & Oates in those days, and George Michael and those people. True.
But now was I'm gonna let Mark go. Was it your decision of the direction of this, in terms of the recording of the music, what type of genre it was?
Oh yeah, I mean, this is what was just coming out of me.
Gotcha.
Those were my songs, either co-writes or my songs completely. And I wasn't going, I want to just copy the Family record. I want to copy a Hall & Oates record. This was my shot, man. This was my shot to do the record that I always dreamed of doing. And I totally recognized that. And what I did is I just wrote the songs that were just flowing out of me. That's the only direction that I gave it, was be as honest as possible at age 21.
Wow. What were you into musically then? I'm curious, what were your influences?
Well, I grew up, with Stevie. I mean, so many people say that, but man, he was and is my idol. George Benson, you mentioned him. I wore out Weekend to L.A. and Breezin', and what's really cool is that I got to write a song for George and play on one of the records that he got nominated for a Grammy for.
Wow.
Actually at Paisley Park. So crazy music business, man. My family and their musicality was probably my biggest influence. So I was listening to my brothers and sisters who would be bringing in, whether it's my mom bringing, Count Basie into the house, or all that kind of stuff, or it was my brothers and sisters with bringing in Tower of Power, or Cold Blood. My brother Billy bringing in Miles Davis, Ricky bringing in Todd Rundgren. Just a complete potpourri of genres, and being the youngest, you just kind of listen to all this stuff and make it your own. You influenced by all these things, but find a way to write what you feel, and that's what just came out, was what you hear on that record.
Wow, incredible. Big Sexy, man, I'm going to turn it over to you for a little bit here.
All right, all right. First of all, Paul, thanks. Nice mention of Cold Blood. I remember Lydia Pence back when I was a kid, man. Oh, yeah. Nice mention.
Was that a funky band or what?
That band was funky. They were no joke, no joke.
Yeah.
Back to your solo album. If I recall, back in that time, around 87, 88, a lot of the Quiet Storm stations are really starting to blow up. I think why didn't MCA push Intimacy in that vein and get that some more play? Because for me, that's still in the Mac database, if you catch my drift.
Wow. That was the second single. And I don't know whether, record companies are funny, man. You really can't understand why they make the decisions they make sometimes. They spent a lot of money on the video for Rich Man. I mean, back in those days, videos like that cost, $250,000 in 1987 money.
Mm.
So they bet the farm on that first single, and then what they do, they go, so are we going to bet the farm on the second single? So I don't really know how well they did at marketing that second single, but it was Intimacy at that point in time. So whether they just said, okay, we're going to put this out there, they didn't do a video on it. Hard to say what their decision making was on that. But at that point, my manager and I noticed that they were kind of like thrown in the towel.
Wow.
We're like, great, this record's way deeper than that. And so we were looking to go somewhere else after that record. We were setting our sights on the follow-up to that.
Now, without getting into, I'll make this quick, Mike, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Without getting into any like LA Law type of vibe here, you mentioned that John McClane, initially approached you, but you ended up on MCA. What was the difference between A&M and the MCA situations? As I recall, I think MCA gave me probably more money, more creative control. And there was a bidding war. Back in those days, they were throwing around big, big, big money, and there was a lot of promises made over at the MCA side of things that John couldn't really match. So that's why I ended up going with MCA. All right.
Were you working with, is it Gerald Busby? Was he there at that time? Or?
Sure was. Gerald Busby and Lou Silas and Irving Azoff.
Okay.
I remember being at Irving Azoff's office. He said, do you want to be on Miami Vice? Because if that's what it takes, then we'll put you on there. Like, Miami Vice, what did I have to anything to do with that?
Hilarious.
But I ended up going with them because I thought Lou and Gerald and I got along great. Not to say that I didn't get along great with A&M and John, but I just felt more comfortable with the music being at MCA.
Okay. I remember, too, I guess at this point, probably when Intimacy was probably coming out, I always got to remember they had, Bobby Brown and sort of New Edition in the wings, I'd imagine, getting ready to drop their...
Yeah, I'm on the same exact label as them.
They're getting ready to drop those bombs. So they probably was like, hey, we're going to jump on this. I can kind of, but interesting, very interesting.
That's division. I mean, that's what used to call that. And that's why I was signed to the black music department, which was awesome. I was great. But I'm sure that, Bobby Brown coming around and I don't know the internal politics dealing with that, whether it was any weirdness or anything like that. I didn't play into any of that. I just made the best music I thought I could make.
I'm curious, looking at the video, looking at it with 2018 older person's eyes, black man eyes. The video is dope to me, but I was like, St. Paul got sisters in the video. It's like, it's all sisters.
Yeah.
Because there was cats back then that brothers wasn't doing this. I was like, man, was that a conscious sort of, do you remember? I don't know if you had anything to do with the casting or anything, but I was like, and then you had a couple of, I've seen some of them in other videos, but you had some bad, great looking women in there. I was like, all right. That's why, again, back then I was like, look at St. Paul.
That's one of the perks of being able to be on the casting, you're involved with the casting of a To be totally honest with you, with regards to the Rich Man video, it's exactly as I had said before. AJ was Sonny's girlfriend, and I saw him like, well, who else should be in this video? He's like, well, what about AJ? Let's yeah, sounds good to me. There was no conscious me going, oh, I need to have 3 sisters in here and, this, that, and the other thing. These just happened to be people I was associating with, and it just worked out.
All right. I'm not mad at you.
Well, thank you.
Back then, that's why I said St. Paul's a real one. I'm like, he probably a player. He smooth. You know what I'm saying? Listen, when I met you for the first time, it was last year. I remember walking into the Capri Theater. You was standing there, and I was like, that's motherfucking St. Paul, right? He had the suit. I was like, you stepped right out of, everything I would imagine. I was like, that screams of passion right there. You just chilling, man.
Well, you should see me now, man. I'm in board shorts and waiting to get on the wave.
Nah, you're the coolest cat.
I'm glad
man.
I didn't disappoint, my brother.
No, not at all. I was like, I had to step my game up. I was like, yeah, this dude is cool, man. I can see it. I understand.
That was a really fun thing to be a part of.
That was
great to meet you there.
That was excellent. I actually had a great time. All right. So let me ask you this: after this album, your second album, it seemed to be I don't know if departure is a word, but like you kind of go pivot a different direction musically. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely. As I look back on it. That was an interesting album. I love the record. Me, a little bit of skin on that because it was more. My managers at the time wanted me to make more of a rock record. They're like, look, you can't compete doing an R&B music record. You need to go more rock and roll. I'm like, I do. So these guys tell me what they thought I should be. I kind of got a little lost, to be completely honest with you. I was like, okay, should I be listening to these guys? I mean, the first record didn't necessarily take off. I'm not a big rock star. Should I listen to these people? Maybe they're right. People get into your head like that, and, especially as young as you are, then the tendency is to kind of lose yourself a little bit. That's exactly what happened. That is not to say that I'm proud of that record. I did have success at Pop Rock, Stranger Love, funky rock record, soulful ballads and things like that on there, but it wasn't straight ahead, funk with influences on it, which is where I come from.
You're kind of breaking up a little bit there, Paul. Paul, you're breaking up a little bit.
Hold on. I'm going to come back out into the windstorm again. All right, do you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hello.
There you go.
Did you hear my answer?
If you could back it up just a little bit.
Sure. You were asking me about the
Second.
Atlantic record, and you said it was a departure, and I think that's a really fair thing to say. My manager at the time said, why are you going for the R&B department? You're a white kid from Richfield. Why don't you make a rock and roll record? At that time, I was, starting to question myself and going, maybe he's right. Maybe I should, listen to him since the last record didn't take off. I'm not a big rock star. I didn't get scored. Started questioning myself. This is all not to say that I'm not proud of that record because, we had some success at MTV and on the Hot 100. But honestly, that record is not a complete fair representation of where I am, which is from the funk jazz world. This was straight ahead rock and roll with some R&B influences and those kind of things. There's some great R&B ballads on there, but for me, I think I got a little lost. So for you saying it's a departure, I think you were right on. It was, and it wasn't necessarily a accurate representation of where I probably should have stayed in hindsight. But hey, you do what you do. Right. You think you make the best decisions at that time in your life, and you listen to people who have influence on you, and maybe they were right, maybe they weren't. I don't know. I still love the record. I think it's cool. But I sure like what I'm doing now.
Right. Now, how many albums did you have on Atlantic? Was there another one after that on there? Or?
Just the one, man.
Just the one? Okay.
That was it. One and done.
And was that, in terms of your solo stuff, was that the last sort of major label thing, or?
Yeah, that was the last major label, and then I followed it up with, I did one called Blue Cadillac in '96.
Mm.
Did a bunch of records with like Minneapolis All Stars, like Family. Played, and that was a period where I was touring a bunch. Toured with the Steve Miller Band and Kenny Loggins and a bunch of different people. So music business is goofy, man. You know, you gotta, especially when you have a young family, you do what you need to do to make a living. And look, I ain't complaining. I've had an incredibly wonderful ride, man, and they continue to have a great ride. And there's so many other people way more talented than me that aren't able to do what I'm able to do. So I'm grateful 100% of the time, man. I'll tell you that.
Well, I would say this, from just watching outside, you always, I say this in a great way. You're a hustler in the sense of you're able to stay working. Like, you've been in this game for a very long time, but I always see you, he's working with this person, or he's doing this, or you have, this band, or you always seem to know how to flip it and keep it going, which I admire that, because that, to me, that's like the musician who can actually eat off of their art and still be true to what they do. That's what you've been doing. So nobody can be mad at that. That's sort of like, that's how you're supposed to be able to do it, and keep reinventing and changing it up. Which would bring us to F Deluxe. This you mentioned how Sheila got you, kind of helped spark getting you guys back together by performing on her thing. What was it like initially getting back in the studio and just coming together and saying, let's do this group again and we're going to do these songs,
It was a journey. I'll tell you that. When I was on tour with Kenny Loggins, I would take breaks in between the tours and go live in Susanna's garage. She was married to Doyle Bramhall at the time, so they had 2 little babies, and so in order to maximize all of our time, I stayed there. They put me up. So the garage was quite comfortable, by the way. So really, the first F Deluxe record is a garage band record.
Wow.
I had my bass, my guitar, all my virtual instruments, microphone, my guitar amps, my bass, everything sitting in there. So I would wake up, have coffee, and roll out of bed and get some grooves happening. And then Susanna would come in and say, I like this one, or I don't like this one, and you change this one. And then, she was the main lyricist on that. That is not my forte. My forte is musicality and production and organization and getting things and hyping things up, as you just mentioned. But Susanna and I took quite a long time making this record. We had never been in the studio with each other before. So there was some growing pains. She'll say the same thing. She was like, I don't like that. I'm like, why don't you like this? We had some arguments that were healthy arguments, and we laughed like you cannot believe. So it was really a good, healthy way to make a record, and we took our time because nobody was bugging us. So we made this record, called in favors. Really are proud. We're all proud of the way this thing turned out, because we didn't know what we were going to write. We weren't interested in making a record that was going to sound like the Family record, because this was our story to tell, not Prince's. We didn't know what stories we were going to tell, musically and lyrically. And we just kind of said, okay, let's just do what we do, and what you hear is what came out. One thing that I'm really proud of is how funky it is, but how musical it is, and how we integrated R&B and jazz harmonics inside of all that. And that's what I think the beauty of that record is.
Wow. I mean, and of course we've said their names, but you have like super players in your group. You have the great Eric Lees. Like this, you can drop the mic on that
Yeah,
alone.
he's the other lead singer in the band. Eric Leeds is our third lead singer.
Yeah,
I'm not kidding. He brings so much to the party, and he's one of my favorite people on the planet. So much so that we have another band called Leeds Peterson. A record we are just in the process of putting out. We can talk about that later, but I respect that man and his musicality so much, and he really helped mold that record to what it is.
Yeah, Eric Lee is incredible. And now Jelly Bean is on there as well, right? Jelly Bean.
Oh yeah,
man.
He's
a lot of people
little drums, a little guitar.
A lot of people, I always feel like he don't really get the respect that he should get. I mean, Jelly Bean is a cold cat. Aside from the drumming with the guitar and everything, I'm like,
yep.
Dude is incredible, man.
And songwriting and production.
Yeah. Like,
he's an incredible guy, man. One of the hardest working guys too. That dude is out every night in the clubs playing with everybody, just to play.
Wow.
He just loves to play.
Wow. Yeah, I gotta try and get him on here one day, because again, one of the dudes.
I'll put in a word for you there.
I would appreciate that, yeah, because he does his thing. Now, also, I wanted to ask Jerome.
Yes.
Here's what I want you to do. Can you? Because a lot of people they'll throw little things out or whatever, but talk to me what Jerome's presence brings to meld this thing together.
Well, Jerome in the family and in the time back in those days, he's an incredible entertainer.
Yeah,
his personality just shines through that whole. His persona is just such to be reckoned with, and he brings so much to the table with that. As far as being in the family, man, he did this exact thing. Incredible actor, incredible showman. When I'm up there playing the bass, that's not that interesting to look at all. He is so. I think his talent, one of his talents, lies in crowd interaction, and just involving people while we're up there trying to deliver the music. He is, man. I wouldn't want to do it without him. Here's the good news. He hadn't been involved with F Deluxe for the first 7 years. He's coming back and doing a couple of shows with us, which I'm so excited.
Wow.
He's always been invited, and I've respected the fact that he didn't want to do it. And that was totally fine, but the door's always been open for him. He's coming back and doing a couple of shows with us.
Wow, that's going to be amazing. And let's just jump into that for a second. So, the Super Bowl is coming soon to Minnesota, Minneapolis.
Yes.
And
we're going to win, too.
I have no skin in the game.
I don't know when this is going to air, but we'll see.
Well, I mean, I think it's a great accomplishment, man, because, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis are sort of curating the entertainment aspect, right, in the city. And looking at, I see the schedule here, and it's great because a lot of the hometown talent is getting center stage. You know what I mean? Like, all these people are coming to town, and you guys are playing. I see they got Cynthia Johnson playing Funky Town on the 26th. That's amazing. Now, you guys are going to be Thursday, February the 1st.
That's right.
You guys are playing, and a very interesting lineup. So, you guys are playing. Then there's the New Power Soul thing is after you. Andre Simone is going down. Talk to us, man, in terms of this being your hometown and, 20, 30 years later, here comes the spotlight again. You guys are already ready and everybody's ready to do their thing. What does this mean to be a part of something like this and still doing it? People still coming to see you.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Jimmy and Terry for thinking of us. I mean, when the Super Bowl announced that they were curating the talent, I was like, well, that's a smart decision. That's only fitting. They deserve that. Then I've been telling you, not a day went by when my phone rang and it's Terry Lewis. Now, I've spoken to Terry Lewis about 4 times in my life. My phone rings. It's Terry Lewis. He said, "Hey, Paul." I'm like, "Terry, what's going on?" He said, "We're curating the talent for this, and we want you to be a part of it." I'm like, "Well, I'll be, man. That's really cool. We appreciate that." Literally, we were on from the beginning.
Wow.
And it was, it's such an honor to be included in that because, sometimes the family and F Deluxe gets, a little, I don't know. It seems like we may not be as present in the Minneapolis scene, but we're the ones who actually have been together for almost as long as the time and it's still playing music. So for them to recognize the fact that we've been working and we're, we continue to make new music, which is super important, for them to recognize that and invite us, it was such an honor.
Right on, man. Yeah, it's just interesting. It all sort of comes around. I mean, the fact that Terry Lewis called you, and you go back to how you got in. Well, I got in opportunity because you weren't there. You know what I'm saying? And that slot opened up. I came in. Some people could have been.
Isn't that
man,
totally crazy?
St. Paul, man, I don't like that white boy. You gonna hear me? No.
Right?
But no, I mean, but you know what I'm saying?
You're right, though. He could have done that.
So it's so dope that it all comes around, and he got an opportunity for you. Say, hey, man, I'm gonna show you some love on this. I think that's just really dope. All you guys get to.
I think it is too, man. And I'll tell you what, we all appreciate it. The fact that he would think of us for that and call us is, it really means a lot. It really does. We're proud to represent.
Right on. And then, like you said, you guys have the you're playing at the Dakota show is
January 31st, 2 shows, and it's the first time that the 5 of us have been on stage in Minnesota since the First Avenue concert.
That's gonna
history
be crazy.
repeating itself, man.
Wow. Man, that's a trip, man.
Fly in, come on. I'm waiting on both of you.
if I was a rich man, I would be there.
Oh man.
So yes.
We're looking forward to that.
Yeah, you.
The minute I get back from Maui, we're striking up the rehearsals, and we'll be ready to go for that week of concerts.
All right. I got to ask you this. We some other questions we have from our listeners and stuff. One of the biggest ones that a lot of people were asking was asking about you guys going on the road and touring. Now, let me ask you this too. I know you guys have something that's coming up in Australia. I don't know, can you talk about what that is?
That's not everybody. That's since I've been doing a lot of work over in Australia with F Deluxe and my other band called St. Paul and the Minneapolis Funk All Stars. It's crazy, to have work over there and people recognize you for that work. I've been asked to be the musical director for a series of concerts called Nothing Compares to Prince. Basically, what that is we're honoring Prince and the music that he wrote with the people who were involved with him. Not unlike what the celebration is, but in another part of the world. So what I like to say is that we're acting as ambassadors for Prince's music. So we want to go over there and represent, our brother in the best way we know how, and continue on the tradition of his great music with some of the people that he played with.
Okay.
So I'm going over there. I'm going to be the music director on that with my brother Ricky, Shelby, Andy, Jellybean, Stokely, Nick West, and I'm forgetting about 10 other people, but you get the idea. So we're doing that in April, right after the celebration in Minneapolis.
Wow. Did you say Andy Allo?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Damn.
Yeah, man. So
Listen,
it's gonna be a trip.
You guys need to let me just give you a suggestion. You guys need a budget for a digital how should I say catalog person, so that way you can fly me out there with you. I'm shooting my
get
shot.
In line, man. I got some family members who are offering that one too.
I'm shooting my shot.
Uncle, don't you want me to come? No.
But we're family.
That's right. No, I don't care. Sorry.
Well, that's amazing, man. That's going to be a major major event in Australia. Now, you mentioned the celebration. I don't know if you can talk about it at all or whatever. Are you going to be doing anything with the celebration this year at all? Or
As of now, we are not scheduled to perform.
okay, all right.
Yep.
I was going to ask you something else. Threw me off. Going back to F Deluxe and the touring, that's what I was going to ask you about the touring. Are there any sort of talk or to tour in America? Is there, I don't know if ask you as a market for that. I know there is, but is there sort of promoters? Is there some idea, spark or something for not just you guys, but even like the MPG and a lot of you guys? There's a demand that people want to see these shows here in the States, as well.
That's right. We have not been able to come together as a package as of yet. Would not surprise me if something like that would happen. But right now, I think everybody's trying to do their own thing. And it includes us with F Deluxe. And, we have, speak for myself, we have a bunch of different irons in the fire. Right now, I just got done making a record with Eric Leeds called Eric Leeds' Paul Peterson Project. That's a super important thing to me, to be able to use as a vehicle to get out and play.
Mm-hmm.
That's a jazz, instrumental, funk fusion record that, we're really super proud of. There's also, if we can keep this entity intact with Jerome in there, that really piques everybody's interest to explore the fact to go on the road and do some shows. The hardest factor is just to get everybody's schedule together because we all got kids, some of them younger than others, but logistics seem to be the hardest part when you get to be the age we are. Certainly, we don't rule it out, though, man. We love playing this music, and we love looking back at the stuff that Prince wrote for us, and also we look forward to making new music with each other.
Right. Okay. Man, you had mentioned to me, I think in Minneapolis, you mentioned about Prince asked you to join his band again. You remember that?
Oh, yeah. So this was right around the time when my brother Ricky was staff producer for Paisley Park. Prince and I were not necessarily on the ins by any stretch of the means, but my brother had an office there. And he allowed me to come into his office because we had a little recording studio up there. Ricky would hire me to play on, a bunch of these side projects. Prince knew dang well I was there. He could have had me removed in 2 seconds, but he tolerated me and he let me play on the records, and we bumped into each other, and we wouldn't have a lot to say to each other, but I was appreciative, and I knew that I was in his house, and that we were not, necessarily on good speaking terms, but I appreciated the fact of being there. Fast forward a few years, I'm out with my brother Ricky making the David Sanborn record in New York City, and that's basically when Prince closed the studio to the public, and Ricky's tenure was done there. So we were going to clean out the room, and then I wrote a note to Prince that just said, look, I know you and I haven't really been on the best of terms. I totally understand why, but I have to thank you for what you've done for me in my career and what you've done for my family. Just want to, so it was kind of a closing a door for me and allowing me to move on, especially after being there and not really dealing with that issue that he and I had. So I was closing the door, thanking him, and moving on with my life. Of course, the next day I get a phone call that said, Prince wants to see you. I'm like, yo, man, when I try to get out, they keep pulling me back in. So I went up to his little apartment on the second floor. Of course, he let me sit there before he made his appearance, just to stew a little bit. He said, what are you doing? I said, what do you mean, what am I doing? Do you make a living making music? I'm paraphrasing for what I can remember of the conversation. I said, yeah, I make a living. What do? Do you write songs? I'm like, yeah. I play in the studio and I go on the road. He said, well, do you want to join my band? I'm like, what? He said, yeah, but it's going to be an all-meatless band. Mad cow disease will kill you. I'm like, oh, boy, here we go again. So we laughed, we joked. I basically declined, and that was it. But
Wow.
to be asked to do that was an honor, especially after all we've been through. And I think that was the start of the healing process for him and I, which was really cool. And we didn't necessarily hang out for after that point, but towards the end of his life in the last 4 or 5 years is when we started to have a relationship. Whether it be him calling me in and cussing me out for trying to use the family name, or hanging out at the Victor Woods concert. Things weren't going to necessarily change. He was like the big brother. At the very end, as he said, one of my last conversations with him was at the Vic Wooten concert. He said, "Do you have a coach?" I'm like, "What?" He said, "Do you have a coach?" "Mine's Larry Graham. He tells me exactly what's wrong and what to do." I said, "Well, yeah, I've got 4 older brothers and sisters. Pretty much tell me when I'm out of line." I said, "Why? Are you offering to be my coach?" I said, "What would that look like?" He said, "Well, then, why are you playing bass?" I said, "Because that's my favorite instrument. You should be playing keyboard like I showed you back in 1983.
Wow.
I'm like, "Okay, coach, keep going." So he was really attempting, I believe, a relationship with me at that point in time. And I'd call him from time to time, and we'd chat here and there, and nothing too deep, but it was a hell of a lot better than it was, when I split the band. So, and not too much prior to his death, he came down and saw my band, Leeds Peterson, with Eric, and he came and checked us out. So, pretty cool. And he had us play at Paisley Park at his record release in September.
That's right.
Before he passed.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. So, things were a little bit better when, towards the end of his life. So I appreciate that.
Wow. That I gotta say, man, that was some real. I'm trying to cuss. That was some real stuff that you did, though, to write that letter. After everything, to be able to just say, you know what, hey, man, thank you. You know what I'm saying? Thank you for opportunities. And like you say, your brother was putting in a lot of work over there. And again,
man.
it's a thing for a guy to be able to look past some little disagreements and say, man, let's break bread together. You know what I'm saying? You're good people. You're talented.
I wish more people would do that in this world, man.
For sure. For sure.
It really, that's as simple as it gets. You say you're sorry for stuff, and you be grateful, and you move on, man. It sounds crazy, but for me, that's where I live my life.
Man, talk to me about your brother, man. Not a lot is known, but I remember seeing his name on them records in the '90s, man. And if I remember correctly, he had a lot to do with also, which to me is one of Prince's coldest songs, is "I Hate You." Did he play on that one too? You remember?
Oh God, you're going to ask me that. I should know the answer to that, but I don't know exactly what songs he worked on, what songs he didn't work on back there. But I'll tell you what, though, Prince loved Ricky from the late 70s. His story is, and you should ask Ricky yourself, I think I'm going to paraphrase this right, is that Ricky was asked to join the band in the late 70s, and Ricky basically said no. And I think Prince respected that because Ricky was getting some play and playing with great people, all through the 80s and 90s, and Prince asked him to come on and be a staff producer. And not many people have been asked to produce Prince.
Right.
I don't know how, maybe David Z, and Josh, and maybe you'll know more names, but can you imagine the honor and the respect that Prince must have had, for my bro to go in and do that? And Ricky is one of the most talented keyboard players, producers I've ever met. He just happens to be my older, dumber brother, and that's why I asked him to do my record. And so many people have asked him to go on tour. He's an amazing, amazing musician and guy. So talented.
Right on. Just to wrap it up, I always got to ask this, and you don't have to answer this, but do you think?
Sure I do.
Do you think the family had the best album on Paisley Park Records?
Oh, of course I do. Any other questions?
I love it.
Well, you asked.
Hey,
Of course I do.
there you go.
I think it's a great record, man. You know what? The thing I can't get over is that he picked me, and I'm forever grateful for that. It changed the course of my career forever. You know, it's something that I'm grateful for and proud of. You know, and I'll continue to make that music and continue to honor that record and the music that he created for me, and we'll keep playing it, man. As long as people want to hear it, I'm gonna play it.
All right. Oh, here's the last thing I'm going to ask, and then I'm going to go to Big Sexy. Going back to the F Deluxe thing and, you know, wanting to use the name, the family, you know, so I think it's the time sort of falls in that same thing. You know, they had to do Original 7.
Yep.
And I think somebody asked this on the Facebook thing. Is there a conversation or even a thought of changing it back to the family now?
You know, I mean, I would never say never. But, you know, at this point, I'm not going to barge in and just do it without, you know, so a lot of careful thought, a lot of respect, and a lot of conversations. You know, we're already established as who we are with F Deluxe, so it's not a big deal to us.
Okay.
Is the timing right to maybe do that? Could be. I'm not ruling it out, but I'm certainly not making it a priority.
Fair enough.
What do you think? What do you think we should be called? Let me put it back on you.
Well, I would say this. I wish it could have been still called The Family, but now, after his passing, I would sort of answer the way you did. It would have to be with a lot of sort of thought and understanding. Because on one hand, you're going to get the pushback that, well, that wasn't his wishes.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? And you have to be careful.
And so why would I change the man that I am now by just barging ahead with
exactly
something like that? That ain't going to happen.
Yeah. So, and you're right. You guys are known. We all know it's the family. You know, the people who need to understand that, we already know. So it's like.
Yep. Plus, you try Googling the family on you know, on the internet. I mean, you get our band up unless you put in Prince's band, The Family.
Oh, okay.
If you Google F Deluxe, we come right up. There are pros and cons for it, you know. We'll think about it. As I said, you know, it's certainly not a priority, but, you know, if the family approaches us, you know, we'd certainly have deep conversations about it. I don't know. You know, again, we're cool with the name we got.
I dig it. Big Sexy.
Yo.
What you got?
Paul, going back briefly, I'm watching you right now, by the way, on your First Avenue Family, set, and I got to get me some silk pajamas like that. That's the look. Okay? I got to hook that up.
I still have.
Oh boy.
My daughter fits in them. She put up a picture of her wearing the robe and the silk pajamas. It fit her perfectly. That's how time was back in the day.
Oh man, that's great.
Hilarious.
That's great.
Isn't that killer?
Back in '83, when you did your first show there with the Time, and I believe, Rocky was on bass. Now, for you as a performer, you know that set was incendiary. Take us back to what that was like when you went out there as a member of that band for the first time. Then compare that with being out front, 3 years later at the same location with the family.
Good question.
Wow, great question, and nobody's ever asked me that one before. Less pressure being the keyboard player. I can tell you that. All eyes weren't on me. They were on, even though I was replacing some of the most, important people in the Minneapolis sound history, they're still looking at Morris and Jerome. They ain't looking at the new white keyboard player in the orange suit. They're probably going, who is this dude, and is he any good? Oh, yeah, I guess he can cut it. Well, now let's watch Morris. Difference in me step up front is, nerves. Am I going to make Prince proud and the rest of my band members proud? Am I going to make my family proud? Am I going to screw up? All the same nerves you get whenever I still go on stage. Am I prepared? Do I have this stuff cold? How do I sound? Am I going to overplay? All these inner dialogue that you have as a musician, as an artist, and you get out and you go on autopilot, and then when it's done, it's like, did that really just happen? And when I walked off stage and Prince hugged me, I did a good job.
All right.
Nice.
I hope that answered your question.
No, it did. It did. Thank you.
All right, Mr. St. Paul, man, again, we really appreciate you sharing your time with us, sharing these stories with us. A lot of us are longtime fans, and we never, get to hear from the actual people. So it's always great when, people can come on and talk about their experiences and share this stuff, because it, puts more light in pieces of the puzzle for us.
Yeah, man.
So,
well, thanks for putting up with the windstorm over here on the North Shore of Maui. I hope it's not too terribly distracting. And, for you to call and ask me 30 some odd years after the initial records that I did, to keep that music alive, man, it's an honor to be a part of something that, that you never thought would be as important as it is to this day. So I appreciate you guys keeping the music alive, and I appreciate you guys keep me in the mix.
Oh man, always, man. Those records mean something to us, man. I used to jam them records as a teenager. I still pull them in rotation, and that's something I want musicians, artists to know, man. Like, that stuff matters. Like, there's new people listening to it, old people listening to it, but we still care about it. Some of you didn't get the due they needed back then, but we're gonna give it to them today. So there you go.
Well, here's what
Go ahead.
I got to tell you something. I just saw this movie called Rumble. And a friend of mine, Stevie Salas, he was the executive producer on this record about Native Americans, their contribution to the music scene. One of the things that one of the people said in it is that the arts, music, is the medicine that keeps this world sane. And I couldn't agree with it more, man. What we need is more people supporting the arts, supporting the music that heals us. And I think that's what not only Prince's music does, but all of these individual artists that you validate by calling us and asking how we made the music. I think that just aids in the healing and the medicine. Wow. So good on both you.
Man, we appreciate it. Listen, we want to shout out all of our listeners and friends and family who contributed to questions, and just listen to the show and keep everything going. Go out to the concerts of F Deluxe and the family and all the other great groups. This whole community, man, we want to shout out everybody, because this is why we do it. It's great to be a part of something. Thank you again, Paul. Shout out to Eric Leeds. And the whole family, Susanna, Jellybean, Jerome, your brother Ricky. What was the other gentleman? I'm sorry. He still plays with you today. Last name starts with an L. I'm sorry. You say he's in your band.
Lieber.
Yeah, Oliver Lieber. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, shout out to Oliver Lieber. And, man, just keep doing it. We're going to keep listening. Podcast Juice family, as I always say, I'm most appreciative of you guys. Keep working it like a job. We will see you next time. Big Sexy, I'm going to let you take us out. One last word. Go ahead.
Well, Paul, I got to say one last thing. When you guys go on tour, if you happen to do intimacy in concert, I will act a fool. There it is.
There you go. Add that.
Man, that's cool.
Yeah, add that to the playlist. That'll be a cold performance right there.
I will be down for that.
I love that song.
All right, we out of here. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Then I say